I need money, Dad, my daughter said, sliding a folder across the kitchen table like it was just another bill. It's my husband's debt. $450,000. She didn't even look up from her phone. Don't disappoint me, she added, her voice sharp and cold. I just smiled, poured myself another cup of coffee while she kept scrolling. 6 hours later, my bank account was empty. That night, when they came back for the money, the house was empty. Only an envelope sat on the kitchen table. When they opened it, their faces went white. The doorbell rang 3 times the next morning, quick and urgent. I knew who it was before I looked through the window. My daughter Victoria only showed up unannounced when she wanted something. I set down my tea and walked slowly to the door. Through the glass, I saw her silver BMW parked sideways across my driveway. She'd inherited her mother's beauty, but none of her warmth. When I opened the door, she brushed past me without a hug, just a quick air kiss. Dad, we need to talk, she said, heading straight for my kitchen. Victoria sat in my chair and placed a thick brown envelope on the table. She kept typing on her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. Coffee would be nice, she said without looking up. I made it automatically. 50 years of serving others, as if that was all I was good for. When I set the cup down, I noticed her fingers trembling slightly. How's Blake and the kids? I asked about my son-in-law and grandchildren I rarely saw. They're fine, she replied flatly. Finally, she put her phone down. Dad, I'll get straight to it. I'm in serious trouble. I sat across from her as the kitchen clock ticked steadily. Blake got involved in something bad, she said, pushing the envelope toward me. He made a terrible investment. I opened it carefully. Inside were bank statements, debt notices, and a loan contract stamped in bold red letters. $450,000. My heart dropped. That was almost everything I had left from selling the family business after my wife Nancy passed away 3 years ago. Victoria, I said quietly, that's nearly all my savings. She took a sip of coffee, her cold eyes finally meeting mine. Dad, you don't really need that money. You live alone. Everything's paid off. Your expenses are nothing. You're 71 years old. What are you saving it for? The words stung like a slap. The house, my only real asset, was still in her name. Nancy's decision years ago, supposedly to avoid estate taxes. It's not that simple, I murmured. I still have medical bills, insurance premiums. Victoria tapped the table impatiently, cutting me off. Blake trusted the wrong people. If we don't pay by tomorrow, things will get dangerous. These aren't bankers, Dad. They're criminals. My hands shook slightly as I gripped my cup. How dangerous? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You don't need the details, she said dismissively. Just trust me. It's just a loan. We'll pay you back once Blake's new business deal goes through. I stared at the envelope, then at the face of the little girl who once climbed into my lap for bedtime stories. Now a stranger sat in my kitchen demanding my life savings. You've borrowed from me before, Victoria. Twice. I never saw $1 back. Her expression hardened immediately. This time is different, Dad. Stop being dramatic. I'm your only daughter. You always said family comes first. I heard the familiar manipulation, the same tactics Nancy used during our difficult years. I need time to think, I said quietly. There's no time, Victoria snapped. I need the money transferred today. Tomorrow's too late. She stood behind me, placing her hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, oppressive. Dad, she said, her tone softer now. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. This is for Blake's safety, for our family's safety. That word, family, the spell that had controlled me for decades. All right, I whispered. I'll do the transfer. Victoria smiled for the first time since arriving. Thanks, Dad. I knew I could count on you, she said, checking her watch. I've got appointments, but I'll come back tonight for dinner and we'll finish everything, okay? I nodded silently. She grabbed the folder, kissed my forehead, and headed out. Don't let me down, Dad, she said, like a parent scolding a child. The door slammed shut. I stood there, staring at the half-full coffee cup, realizing I'd just made a terrible mistake. Through the window, I watched her car speed away, gravel flying across the garden I'd maintained for decades. Then something clicked inside me, an idea the old me would never have considered. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Harold, it's Thomas. I need your help, urgently. Less than 40 minutes later, my old friend arrived. Harold and I had served in the military together nearly 50 years ago. He'd become a financial advisor while I'd taken over the family hardware business. He'd never approved of how Nancy controlled our finances, but he'd always been there when I needed him. $450,000? Harold nearly dropped his coffee. Thomas, are you insane? That's everything you worked for your entire life. I shook my head slowly, feeling the weight of truth settling over me. It's not the first time, I admitted. 2 years ago, it was $80,000 to help Blake start his consulting business. Before that, $60,000 to cover their mortgage when they had problems. I never saw any of it returned. Harold set his cup down hard. Why do you keep doing this, Thomas? You used to be sharp. Why can't you see what's happening? His question hit like a punch. I went silent for a long moment. Because she's my daughter, I said finally, the old reflex speaking for me. And you're her father, not her personal bank, Harold shot back. Nancy controlled you for 35 years, and now your daughter's walking the exact same path. I looked out at my vegetable garden where tomatoes had finally started ripening after years of poor yields, just like me, surviving against terrible odds. Today, I said, surprising even myself. Today what? Harold asked. I took a deep breath, feeling something inside me break apart and reshape itself into something stronger. I want you to help me transfer all my money into an account Victoria doesn't know about. And I want to disappear before she comes back tonight. Harold's eyes widened, then he smiled slowly. Thomas Patterson, I've waited nearly 50 years to hear you say that. He pulled out his phone immediately. I've got a friend with a cabin in Montana, empty right now. She's coming back tonight, right? Harold continued. That gives us about 9 hours. More than enough time. He was already making calls. First stop, the bank. Then we'll go to my lawyer to set up legal protection in case she tries anything. After that, we pack and leave. I stood up, terrified, but strangely exhilarated. I'd never made a bold decision in my entire life. She's going to lose her mind, I muttered. Harold took my hand firmly. Are you afraid of her? I thought of Victoria's face when things didn't go her way, her voice turning harsh, her eyes cold like ice. Yes, I admitted, feeling ashamed. Then it's time to stop being afraid. I went upstairs and pulled out an old duffel bag I'd used decades ago during my service. I packed a few clothes, medications, important documents, and a few photos of Nancy from our better years. In the drawer, I found a small metal box Nancy had never known about. Several $1,000s I'd saved from selling tools and doing repair work over the years. My small act of quiet rebellion. I picked up a framed photo of my granddaughters, then paused at a picture of Victoria as a child. After a moment's hesitation, I set it down. When I returned downstairs, Harold was finishing a phone call. "The flight to Billings leaves at 2:30, Harold said. "We'll have time for the bank and the lawyer." At the bank, the manager looked concerned when I requested to transfer everything to a new account. "Are you certain, Mr. Patterson? This is a substantial amount." "Completely certain," I said, signing the papers. "And please don't send any statements to my home address." While we waited, Harold looked at me seriously. "What are you planning to leave for Victoria?" I pulled out a handwritten note. Just this. A message she should have learned long ago. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe. You won't believe what happens next. The note was simple. I placed it in an envelope on the kitchen table before we left. "The one who disappointed you is me. This debt cannot be repaid with money." As I pulled my duffel bag toward the door, I glanced back at the house that had been both my home and my prison for decades. In the garden, the tomato plants swayed in the breeze, growing strong and free, like I would be from now on. In the taxi to the airport, Harold held my shoulder supportively. "Are you okay?" The city blurred past the window, carrying away all the years I'd lost. "Not yet," I said honestly. "But I will be." Harold's cabin in Montana was small but comfortable, surrounded by pine trees and overlooking a crystal-clear lake. That first night, I sat on the porch, listening to the sounds of nature. When I finally turned on my phone, there were 19 missed calls from Victoria. I turned it off again. I wasn't ready to face that storm yet. "She'll find you eventually," Harold said, pouring whiskey. "We'll need a long-term plan." I nodded, feeling strangely peaceful despite everything. "I never thought I'd have the courage to do this." Harold smiled warmly. "I always knew you had it in you, Thomas. You just needed the right push." In the following days, my phone kept buzzing constantly. Victoria, Blake, even my sister, Patricia, they were all drawn into it. In one voicemail, Victoria's voice wavered between pleading and threatening. "Dad, please call me back. You can't just disappear like this. The house is still in my name, remember? Think very carefully about what you're doing." A week after I left, I began rebuilding my life in Montana. I opened a new bank account, rented a small apartment near the lake, and started doing handyman work for locals. At 71, I'd never truly worked for myself before, but people appreciated my skills and paid fairly. Harold stayed in Seattle, but acted as my eyes and ears back home. He told me Victoria had shown up at his office, furious, demanding to know where I was, threatening lawsuits, claiming I was mentally unfit to make decisions. "What did you tell her?" I asked during one of our phone calls. "I told her you're perfectly sane. Sharper than ever, actually. And if she keeps threatening people, I'll help you file for a restraining order." Harold laughed. "You should have seen her face, Thomas. I don't think anyone's ever said no to her before." By the end of my first month away, I received a letter from Victoria's lawyer. The letter demanded I return immediately, citing concerns about my mental health and threatening to seize control of my assets. In the same envelope was a handwritten note from Blake, filled with desperation. "Thomas, please come back. Victoria's out of control. The creditors are closing in. We need you desperately." I handed everything to Harold, who responded formally on my behalf, attaching my latest medical report confirming I was perfectly sound, along with a detailed record of all the money Victoria had taken over the years. "It'll be fine," Harold reassured me over the phone. "But Victoria won't give up easily. She just lost her personal ATM. And that was you." The next month brought an unexpected visitor. Blake showed up at my apartment door. His face was pale, his body noticeably thinner than before. "How did you find me?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "We hired someone to track you down," he admitted, looking embarrassed. Can I please come in? I hesitated, but eventually opened the door wider. Blake looked around the tiny apartment, clearly shocked I'd chosen such simplicity after leaving behind a comfortable house. It's peaceful here, he said quietly. We sat on my small porch overlooking the lake. Blake held his coffee cup with trembling hands. Things are really bad, Thomas, he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. Victoria's changed completely. She's angry all the time, totally unhinged. The kids are scared, Thomas. They don't understand what's happening anymore. My heart ached hearing about my granddaughters. We sold both cars, Blake continued. Now we're trying to sell the vacation condo to pay off part of the debt. But it's not just $450,000 anymore, Thomas. It's much, much more. I wasn't surprised at all. Nancy had done the same thing, always hiding more debt until it became unbearable. So you didn't come here to convince me to return, I said slowly. You came to ask for more money, didn't you? Blake lowered his head in shame, unable to meet my eyes. It's more complicated than that, he said quietly. The people we owe money to aren't patient or forgiving. Victoria told them you still have money hidden away somewhere. A chill ran through my entire body. She used me as collateral without my knowledge or permission. Blake stayed silent, but his silence confirmed everything I feared. You need to get out, Blake, I said firmly, gripping his hand across the table. Take the girls and go to your parents' house. Leave Victoria before this destroys you completely. Blake's voice shook as he replied, It's not that easy, Thomas. She controls everything, all the accounts, all the paperwork, even my phone access. I don't know how I managed to get away today. I looked at him, my heart breaking for this man who reminded me so much of my younger self. Just like I once didn't know how to escape, but I did it anyway. I can help you, Blake, I said with conviction. Not with money, but with getting free from this nightmare. Blake looked at me, fear and hope mixing in his exhausted eyes. She'll find us, just like she found you eventually. Then we'll be ready when she does, I said, feeling a strength I'd never known before. First, we get you and the girls to safety. Make sure you share this story with someone who needs to hear it. These lessons could change someone's life. After Blake left with a concrete plan and a new untraceable phone number I'd hidden in his jacket, I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. The colors burned bright and fierce, like a symbol of my own transformation from darkness into light. My phone suddenly rang. It was Harold calling urgently. Blake came to see you, didn't he? He asked immediately, his voice tense. How did you know? I asked, confused. Victoria showed up at my office again this afternoon, Harold explained quickly. This time she brought someone with her, a large man with scars across his face. They made threats, Thomas. Subtle ones, but very clear threats. They wanted to know exactly where you were hiding. My heart sank heavily. What did you tell them? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. I told them if they so much as touched you, me, or anyone connected to either of us, I'd make sure they spent the rest of their miserable lives in prison, Harold said firmly. He paused for a moment. Thomas, this is getting genuinely dangerous now. Victoria's desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. You need to be extremely careful. I nodded slowly, watching the last rays of sunlight fade below the mountains, knowing my battle for freedom was far from over. The next morning there was a loud knock at my door. My heart raced. Had Victoria found me already? But when I looked through the people, I saw a woman I didn't recognize holding up a badge. Mr. Patterson, I'm Detective Andrea Collins from the Fraud Division. We need to talk about your daughter, Victoria Patterson. My heart pounded as I opened the door. Is she in trouble? I asked cautiously. Detective Collins kept her expression neutral. May I come in? I invited her inside and made coffee with shaking hands. She sat on my small sofa and pulled out a notebook. "Mr. Patterson, your daughter is under investigation for financial fraud, falsifying loan documents, and connections to a loan sharking operation. We need to know if you're aware of any of these activities," Detective Collins continued. I felt the ground disappear beneath me. Part of me had always suspected Victoria wasn't running honest operations, but hearing the words criminal investigation left me shaken to my core. "I only knew she was having financial problems," I answered carefully. "I didn't realize how serious it was until I left." Collins took notes, then asked directly, "You left your home about 2 months ago, correct? Why exactly?" I told her everything. The repeated loans, the manipulation, the pressure over $450,000. She listened intently, occasionally writing things down. "Did she ever use your name to sign documents or make you sign papers without proper explanation?" I thought back carefully, my stomach tightening. "Yes. About 3 years ago, she told me to sign some papers so she could transfer money easily in case of emergencies. She said it was to protect me as I got older." Collins nodded knowingly. "We found several suspicious transactions in accounts under your name, accounts you probably didn't even know existed." I closed my eyes, feeling sick. Victoria hadn't just manipulated me emotionally. She had stolen her own father's identity for criminal purposes. "What should I do now?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "We'll continue investigating," Collins said. "You'll need to give an official statement soon, and, to be honest, your daughter might face serious charges within the next few weeks. You should also be cautious about your personal safety." After Detective Collins left, I immediately called Harold to tell him everything. He promised to drive up to Montana that same evening. "I always suspected Victoria was involved in shady dealings," he said over the phone. "But not to this extent, Thomas." That afternoon, I received a desperate text from Blake. "She found out about our plan. I'm locked in the bedroom with the girls. She's destroying everything downstairs." My whole body went cold with fear. I called Detective Collins immediately, and she sent local police officers to Victoria's house. The following hours dragged by in agonizing fear and endless phone calls. By nightfall, I learned that Blake and the children were safe in protective custody, while Victoria had been arrested for resisting police intervention and assault. Later that night, Harold arrived and found me sitting quietly on the porch, staring at the dark lake. He sat beside me in silence for a long while, then asked gently, "How do you feel?" I whispered, "Guilty. If I hadn't left, maybe things would have been different." Harold shook his head firmly. "No, Thomas. If you hadn't left, you'd have gone down with her, maybe even gotten pulled into her crimes as an accomplice." He squeezed my shoulder. "You did the only thing you could. You saved yourself, and maybe Blake and the girls too." The stars above Montana shone brighter than I'd ever seen them, each one a reminder that even in darkness, there's light. For the first time in 71 years, I was finally free to be just Thomas, not someone's husband, not someone's personal bank, just me. And that was enough.